Good evening. On behalf of the Visual Arts and Media Studies Division here at PCC, I'd like to thank you all for coming to our 31st, the start of our 31st Artists in Residence Week here at PCC, and we're proud to have Corey Newkirk ready to speak to us in just a couple of minutes. My name is Joe Footner. I'm the Dean, and I appreciate your coming to the talk this evening. I am not going to talk anymore because I don't have anything prepared, but Mahara Sinclair, our gallery director, is well prepared, and she'll be up to introduce Corey in just a minute or so. Thanks.
Thank you, Joe. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for being here and joining us in the celebration of our 2018 Artist in Residence, Corey Newkirk. We're so glad you could be here with us. We have a reception after the lecture, so in the Boone Family Art Gallery, so we'll go and you can see his artwork, and we'll have some treats there. We also have the Joshua Haycraft show is open, so you can check out both shows. We have those little, paper lanterns, so we can walk from one gallery to the other, and Joshua is here too, so he can talk to you and answer questions about your work. I know he's here somewhere in the audience too, so. So I wanted to give some special thanks to our Pasadena Art Alliance. Wonderful, we just could not do this without the Pasadena Art Alliance. So we really are so deeply grateful to them for their support, and they are the reason we still have our Artists in Residence program. We also wanted to thank the Student Services Fund for their support, the Office of the President and the PCC Foundation, Dean Joe Footner and the Visual Arts and Media Studies Department, and also Eladio and Office Services did all the brochures, and printing was done in-house, did a great job. And we have an essay in the brochure by one of our finest LA art writers, Travis Diaz. So please do get a copy of the brochure if you haven't already. It's a really super great brochure. And then special thanks to Charles Jones. He is our graphic designer and gallery manager, and he just really brings it all together. So we really, really are deeply grateful to Charles. Corey received his MFA from UC Irvine back in 1997, and then in 1993 he received his BFA from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. He first came to prominence with the freestyle show at the Studio Museum in Harlem. And he's shown at the Dakar Biennial, the Whitney Biennial, the California Biennial in Newport Beach, and he's also had solos at the LAX Art and the Pasadena Museum of California Art. And he's been in some significant group shows as well. There's Mocha's Blues for Smoke show, and the Uncertain States of America show in Oslo, Norway, just to mention a few of the highlights of his international career. What's neat about Corey's work, he uses really unexpected materials, and he really cogently comments on our everyday world and then what that says about us as a culture. So I'm real excited to present to you our 2018 Artist in Residence, Corey Newkirk. Please join me in welcoming Corey.
Thank you. Hi. That was really sweet. You can all hear me, correct? Yeah. Great. First I'd just like to thank quickly Charles and Mahara for all the patience in the world and all the wonderful things in dealing with me, trying to get me to put the show up and together for you here. It's been quite a pleasure. So, and I just think Pasadena has kind of always been kind to me since I've been in California. So that's awesome. This should be really fun and exciting today. Thank you for coming. I will say that there's a lot of stuff to look at. So we're just gonna jump right into it. But I would like to say, though, if you have a question, It would be great if you could just interrupt me, like, hey, Corey, stop, right? Because I have a question about the thing that I'm looking at up there. Because I find that I don't have the brain capacity to like get to the last slide and then answer a question about the first slide. So it would be great if you just feel comfortable enough to interrupt me and we can address whatever question, comment, thought, idea that you have with the image while it's up there. Does that make sense? Right, great. So I guess we're just going to start. I hope, and if I go way over time, please, again, that's another great moment for you to be like, hey, Corey, you need to be quiet because we want to get out of here. And I won't be offended by that. All right, so I'm just going to go and start a long time ago and then race to the present. I think that I chose to do this today because of the unique nature of this institution, right? This is a school. I know that there are, the majority of you are students, so I think that when I was a student, and I, in some ways, will always be a student, think that it's really interesting to see a large breadth of a practice. So I'm going to do what I consider some of my own personal favorites. There might be some misses. There's some hits and some misses. There's some things that don't normally get shown. Some contextual things. Lots of stuff going on here. So we're just going to get started. So I was trained many, many years ago and I thought of myself as a painter. That didn't last very long. This is a painting. This is probably from about 1993, so it's rather, vintage is what I would probably use to describe this. So this is a painting. It's encaustic and oil on board, and it leans up against the wall. At this point in my life, I was really trying to make what I thought were highly conceptual paintings about space and using, I guess, what would be non-traditional materials. This is encaustic, which is basically wax and oil paint mixed together. I was really going through a time of trying to call myself a painter who doesn't paint. So I would do anything to try to make a painting that dealt with the issues of paintings that I really like, the formal things, color, line, value, shape, without actually having to pick up an actual paintbrush. That was really difficult considering how I considered myself a painting major and was only taking painting classes. But somehow I was able to mentally deal with my non-painting painter status and make paintings that to me looked like paintings and talked about all the things that I was interested in a painting with no paint. This is also from that time. This is just a bunch of little clear plastic bags filled with antifreeze stapled on a panel, right? Again, light, color, form, some formal things, some conceptual things, trying to question, like, what is a painting? And why would I want to make one? I don't know if I ever had those or still don't know the answer to that question, but I still like to show these things because I think it's kind of important for some of the later work and just for me to remind myself of what I was interested in and try not to always stray too far from that. So, yeah, that thing. After I got over my non-painting paintingness, because that continues, but it's not something I talk about a lot, I realized that after that I needed to figure out some other things that I wanted to talk about. And I started to realize that I'm a black guy, right? And existing in this body that you see here requires a certain way of moving throughout the world and sort of certain stance, or I chose to take a certain stance. And I realized that I was far more interested in making work about certain types of issues than just sort of making paintings about paintings with no paint. That wasn't going to necessarily get me so far, but I was able to give myself permission to start to talk about issues of my identity. And this is an earlier work along those lines. This is a page from a Dick and Jane book. You know, I got forced to read a lot of those when I was a child. Totally enjoyable. But not really so tied into my reality of everyday life. There is a little bit, but I'm sure things were slightly different. So in thinking about these and thinking about my life, I was looking for some way to maybe rewrite these books. So here we have Mark, and he is playing with a bubble machine, but all the bubbles have been replaced by hair. Now that's my hair from my haircuts. So I was using, and at that point was really into using my hair as a marker of my identity, right? This very particular type of hair, and how can that function in society? How does that function in the world? How do I want that to function in my own artwork? And so I used it to really have Mark have some fun, right? Because that's actually, if you think about it, I mean, I think this is kind of beautiful, but at the same time, it could be kind of gross, right? It has the potential to go either way, right? The idea of the hair in the mouth. I mean, if we're going to get literal, or just like imagining hairy bubbles floating through the air, right? So I really enjoy talking and making work that my goal often is to go right down the middle and let the audience do the heavy lifting or the deciphering as to which way they would like to interpret that. So
Is this from undergrad, grad, or
oh yes, this is, we are already in grad school.
Okay, great.
Right. So I didn't spend too much time with those painting type of things I was doing. So this is, right, this would be 96, 95, 96. We're still way back there, so.
Is this the same caption that was actually on with that?
Oh yeah. Right, it's both of those were the actual book pages, just sort of ripped out and articulated with the hair and then stuck in a frame. I think there's one more. So, you know, really trying to explore my childhood and the reality of my life. Now here we have Sleeping Beauty, same thing. So there was the Dick and Jane books, and then there were also some fairy tales in which I did the same thing. These times they are thinking and speaking these sort of mysterious black thoughts. So I have no idea what that prince is really saying or what she is dreaming. I can only imagine that this probably was not the original intention, but it works really well for me to see them having these mysterious sort of kind of beautiful, potentially something else, dark in another way kind of thoughts. You know, trying to make these things accessible to everybody. We're still in that time frame. So this is, well, let me just say, I come from a place where there is not like a Southern California car culture. I'm from Central New York. And when I ended up out here in Southern California, the whole sort of car culture was a little bit much to deal with, but pleasantly surprising. But I really tried to find a way to locate myself in this conversation of my new home. And I started to, again, look back at my own life and try to mine my existence for some way to figure out how I fit. And started to understand and realize that my family has this very long, strange history with the Cadillac, right? So part of it, I think, can be read as almost stereotypical and aspirational and just interesting, and it's kind of strange to me. But what I did for this piece is I went out to the closest parking lot that I could find, found a Cadillac, I think it was a mid-'80s one, and just measured it so that I would have the length of the actual car. So this is about 17 feet long, the piece, and it is also covered with hair. So I spent quite a little bit of time in the barbershops and salons of Long Beach and Los Angeles, picking up the hair that was freshly cut off of people's heads off of the floor, taking it back to the studio, washing it, dyeing it, picking the rice and the sunflower seeds out of it. Who knew that those were really popular foods in sort of Southern California black barbershops? It was amazing to see that. And then just sort of glued this hair onto this Cadillac sign. I will say that I did look like quite the masturbator with my hairy palms for about 2 weeks. I do not have a picture of that, I'm sorry. I hope that doesn't go over everyone's head. There's that myth about hairy palms and everything, and I actually got to live that in reality. It's not as great as one might imagine to walk around like that, but those are the things that we do for what we make. Sadly, this no longer exists. I wish I still had it, but it just, got destroyed. Soon after that, I think now we are in 97, 98, so we're still way back there. I'm done with school. I'm trying to figure out, again, who am I? What is going on here? What do I want to make? How do I make things that talk about the reality that I'm going through? And I was given an opportunity to have a show in a place called Deep River, which was downtown, no longer exists. I think one of the founders was Daniel J. Martinez, who did one of these a few years ago. I don't know if he talked about Deep River, but might have been before that time. Space doesn't exist anymore. A place made specifically to have solo shows and for a section of Los Angeles in a way that was not getting a lot of play in the galleries. So my turn came up and I made this crown made out of giant hair picks. So each one of these is my height, so it's about 6'2". There's 9 of them. They are made out of foam with resin, so not only did I get to make this crazy giant hair pick crown, but I got to sort of, again, play with Southern Californian tropes by thinking I was making a surfboard, right? And using the same sort of surfboard making approach of the foam and the layers of resin and the sanding, and trying to, again, locate myself in the world that I found myself in. I don't know, I actually really sometimes like looking at this because not only is it about ideas of self-love and trying to be proactive and sort of celebratory, but this thing has other moods, I think. I always felt that it had other moods. It looks innocuous from the outside, but there is a real sense of, I don't know if it's necessarily urgency, but there's another thing that started to happen when it ceased to be sort of decorative and started to be closer to a cage or a cell. All right, so again, the work can be read in many different ways, and by itself tends to flip-flop between a lot of meanings. Or that's my hope, my wish, that these things can happen. So this piece definitely would be like, oh great, I have this crown on my head, but at the same time, it's really got some darker moods that are associated with it when you would look at this thing. All right, no hands up? Awesome. This is a self-portrait. So for a while, after I finished grad school, I taught high school in South Central Los Angeles for about 3 years. And taught art. And a lot of times, in conversation with the students, trying to figure out how they saw themselves and where they found themselves in popular culture, or where they actually probably where they did not find themselves in popular culture at that time. So in terms of conversations about that with the students, that spurred on a body of work that let me have my first show here in Los Angeles many, many years ago, and this was in it. So this is, again, like a painting with no paint, right? These are all encaustic squares painted individually, put together to form this digitized self-portrait. So this has got to be like 1999 or so, so way before sort of cell phones and everything. But I really love watching cops on television, and at this time there was another show at the same time called LAPD Life on the Beat. All right, so I would watch these shows and really was trying to pay attention to how they depicted the suspects, right? Because the way that these suspects were depicted on both shows was different. But also trying to talk to my students about how and where they saw themselves, and a lot of times, for better or worse, they felt that they would be in the same sort of position as the suspect, right? Suspected of things. So this self-portrait would face this self-portrait. So you can see that on one of them, right, let's say this is cops, they would digitize it in that way, and on LAPD Life on the street or the beat, I can't remember, they would just do a blur. So I just inserted myself into these works using those television shows as a basis, and also, again, trying to talk about, okay, here I am, again, newly-ish arrived in Los Angeles, understanding what is going on, what is my place. I am a young black guy. They were still sort of killing each other. You know, people are still killing each other for the colors that they wore, right? So, as you can see, this one has the blue shirt. This one has a color-coded red shirt. So, subtle ways to try to talk about much larger conversations that were going on in the city at the same time. And this is taken outside my building downtown, where I have lived for the past 20 years. So even if as I look at this, I understand that this is a location and a vision that can no longer exist, right? I'm sure you all have seen what is happening all over the place, so this does not look as rough as it did all those years ago. So it becomes a historical document. Yes?
Interesting how just blurring someone's face does make a person seem sinister, whereas.
Thanks. Thanks. Well, also, what I realized around this time is that in all of my self-portraits, I never really wanted them to be about me, specifically. And so from those two works, the majority of the self-portraits that would come after that, my identity as an individual would always be obscured, because it really was far more interesting for me to talk about the larger aspects of what I can represent as compared to the specificity of like, oh, look, that's Corey, right? But that can be me, but it could be a lot of other people, a lot of other things can be said as compared to just having it like, be just like this, which was not always so interesting to me. So yes, there's another self-portrait with trying to talk about a lot of the other same things that run throughout the practice.
That other self-portrait, was there a reference or a thing, an image you were looking at in relationship to that one?
Which one?
The one we just saw.
The one with my hair, that one? No, this was, this goes with a body of work, and I don't make a lot, I'm not a big body of work, I'm more of like a singles guy. This went with a body of work that's gonna happen that you'll see in the next image, but I think this was more, again, about location and not really about where I would be, but more about where I was not, if that makes any sense, right? The obscured identity, the idea of like who gets to lay on certain types of yards or lawns and flowers, and like what does a white shirt and a tie sort of mean? What can it symbolize? What can it not mean? Like all of those questions kind of going through my mind at that time. I hope that kind of answers that.
Yeah,
No, great. And so I think this is the last self-portrait that I will show. So that earlier digitized self-portrait came back to influence this piece. Now we're in like 2004. That was made at the Fabric Museum and Workshop in Philadelphia. I was really thinking about, what was I thinking about? I was thinking about a little bit about mortality issues. I don't exactly remember why. It was just a weird moment of like, I really was thinking about those issues and had the opportunity to make something large scale and made this giant, or was assisted in making this giant box kite. I really imagined this thing, because it's built to fly, it's flying and changing as it rotates in the sky, and as the viewer would move their body, and the body and face in this moves, things appear and disappear all at the same time. It can all happen really quickly, and I thought that tied to issues of mortality, and then color, and then again it's like, oh, there's this giant black head floating up over me. In a way, what does that mean? Where am I? Where should I be? Am I in the right place? What's going on here? All those things, attempting to bring them together with this large box kite, which I have never seen fly, but perhaps one day. Right, can see out there, okay. And then you see all the other works that we'll talk about briefly, maybe not, other things in there. All right, now we're getting to the good stuff. So I think what I tend to be asked about the most often or known for, even though I resist a lot, is these beaded curtains that I make. So this is the first real serious beaded curtain that I made. This is about 8 by 8 feet square. It is called Jubilee. I will say that I was in Skowhegan, Maine, after I finished school at Irvine. So, you know, and that's like a little art camp that happens out there in Maine. So I'm stuck in the woods with like 75 other artists, not enjoying that part of it. I'm realizing that I will never, ever want to be around that many artists in a place where I can't escape, and can't, like, you know, push people in a lake or anything. So I remember that year and the end of that year really specifically because that was the year that Venus Williams went from being an unranked just tennis player to going to the finals of the US Open, right? So I'm stuck in Maine, not a huge tennis fan necessarily, but would read in the newspaper the day after everything happened, when it finally got to that remote location, these fascinating stories about Venus going from having no ranking to the finals. But what struck me the most about these articles were the complaints from the other players about her hair, her and her sister's hair, because that was the time when they had beads and braids. And so all these other players were all worried that these beads were going to fall out of their hair and go all over the court and they're going to break their ankles. It never happened, but just reading about that immediately, you know, your brain starts firing, and I started to think about Stevie Wonder in the 70s and the 80s and even now, right, that he's got braids and beads in his hair. I started to think about the decorative beaded curtains that would cover the doorways of relatives' homes, my desire to have beads and braids when I was a much younger man, and that never was fulfilled, and all of those things sort of coming in together and resulting in these beaded curtains. Right, so it's, I'm just going to show quite a few of them, kind of in a slight chronological order. That really was the first one. This is from the second body of work. I started to realize that unlike this sort of pop moment, which went with those two portraits that were earlier, a conversation about Los Angeles, right? Because it seems to always be on fire or flooding or breaking, or something's always a problem here. So this is one that looks like this. I realized that I was far more interested and connected to ideas of the rural, the suburban, and the exurban, right? That the materials, the beads and the braids, were the very urban part of this, but the reality of my reality is that I kind of grew up in the country, and that's the thing that I wanted to depict, right? The rural, the exurban, and the suburban. This is just a detail of that curtain. So all those beads are hand strung on synthetic hair that I buy from the beauty shop or the hair supply store. So it's really the stuff that is meant to go in someone's hair and on someone's head, and everything just gets strung up. And can tell you that about 4 of those beads is about 1 inch. And these curtains can get pretty big. So there's a real labor issue in the production of them. And had I ever thought that I would end up making landscapes as I got older from earlier, I never would have believed you if someone had said, "Oh, you're going to make some landscapes." But again, trying to talk about location, where you are, where you're not, trying to slightly racialize it, or maybe not slightly racialize it, but talk about some of those issues through the use of the materials and the imagery. So, you know, cul-de-sac, a certain type of Southern California home.
Excuse me, Gordon.
Yes.
You said ex-urban.
Ex-urban. Yeah, that is the space between like the suburbs and the country, right? It's like a neither thing. So, right, we understand like a suburban thing, right? And then you start to go out to the rural. So there's spaces in between those spaces, and they have names. And so that would be the what did I call it again?
Ex-urban.
The ex-urban, right. Right, suburban, right. So that is sort of between the suburban and the rural. I think they just name it the ex-urban, not the ex-urban, right? But ex-urban in another way. So this is a depiction of some house on Mount Washington here. Again, a lot of landscapes. This was. I think this is called Suspect. This was OJ's house, was the basis for this. I had a friend who came to visit me when I moved out here who forced me to go on that OJ Simpson sort of tour of that part of the city because that was still going on. And the best I got out of that day was a shot down the street that I could turn into a curtain. I can't remember the names of all of these necessarily. I think this is called Hutch. This is just another landscape of a lake or an inlet somewhere. I will say that I think it's because it's important that these images are appropriated. Sometimes I appropriate them, so sometimes I see something and I think that would make a great curtain, and sometimes I take the images, but I don't really differentiate for, and will not differentiate for your benefit tonight. Those are like, I have to keep some secrets myself. Occasionally they would be abstracted, like we have here, just a sort of wintry landscape. Oops. Here's a detail of, this is far more recent than most of them. I have stopped making these. I did not really want to be known as the bead boy. And so I don't make these like I used to, because some of the branches of the art world that I feel that I like to play in, or I'm let to play in, really like to, I don't know if the world in general likes it when you do a lot of different things, right? So I tend to do a lot of different things. I don't really just want to make the same type of work over and over again. I always think it's super commendable when I meet other artists who can really do that. I think it would make me go nuts. So in order to keep my own sanity, I am a little bit all over the place. It's not so great for my pocketbook, but I feel good. So here is a detail of, like I said, of something recent. So this one was a real challenge. It's a waterfall, trying to, how do I sort of depict falling water, right? Sometimes it's really simple questions that can spur on some great work, right? I don't know if I need to really always think or overthink it too much. It's just, something simple can make things happen. Yes?
Did you ever consider that perhaps you would be associated with craft?
Nope. No, that is a good question. I will say that I feel like I was really lucky, and the people who were, taking care of me, right, sort of putting this stuff out in the world, really worked succinctly to make sure that I was not sort of seen as a craftsperson, right? That this work not that there would be anything wrong with that, right? But that this work, it was intended to be read in a slightly different way than that. Myself personally, I love all those crafts, right? I almost became a fibrous major. We don't need, that's too much for me to share at the moment, that part of it, but I really like that question. And that's something that I'm always constantly dealing with too, not just with the beaded curtains, that sort of craft question. One of the very rare urban curtains, or urban depictions on a curtain. Here we have someone for scale.
This is a little bit of a boring question.
No such thing.
But what was your procedure from going from the photograph to translating into beads? Because they're very complicated. There must have been, and you don't have to share it if there's like a secret, but there's,
There's no secret. I mean, up here, I'm an open book. Now, the question is, what would you want to know, like the how?
a little bit, yeah, just technically, like these photographs
Right.
are so large and they're complicated and you've got to switch it over into rows of color.
Oh my goodness. And anyone who is really curious about this, you are more than welcome to come down to my studio at any time, and I'll put you in front of one of them and put you to work, and you can see how really tedious and laborious and slightly boring, but rather zen it can be. As soon as I determine the imagery that I'm going to make, it gets quickly run through the computer just to have a scan. No size changes, nothing, no editing, nothing like that happens. And so I just need that digital image. I then output that as a transparency. That's when the size will be adjusted maybe, and maybe a little bit of editing. Output it as a transparency, then that transparency gets projected onto a piece of paper. And then I just do a really loose line drawing that's on, the piece of paper is bigger or the same size as the curtain, because then the braids and the aluminum are already together. So it would just be like a naked thing of braids and a drawing behind it, like a cartoon, right? I think it's called a cartoon, the loose drawing, and then I just sit there, or if I'm lucky enough to have assistants or helper monkeys, as they like to call themselves at that time, and we just go from the bottom and start stringing all the way to the top, and then the image appears from the top down. So it can be really, sometimes it can be rather quick, sometimes it can be really intense. It depends on what we're trying to make. But I think I've gotten so much better over all the years that I just made one in about 3 weeks. But it's not huge. It's only it's like 3 foot wide by like maybe 4 feet. But by now I can just go nuts and do it. But it can be rather complicated because there are many times where it's like one bead needs to change, right? So what do you do when that's like right in the middle of everything? And there's ways I have figured out ways so I could really change a bead in the middle of that without having to take everything down like I did much earlier, where the whole thing would just come down to change like 2 things. Oh, but practice makes perfect. So there's just a few more of them. After making a lot of them, some things had to happen. So I had pushed a few into the corners. I had used a lot of negative space with some of them, and then they started to jump off the wall. So this is, what is this called? I can't remember the title, but I remember it's from 2006. I will probably remember the title at some point. And here is the other side of this. So the narrative with this is I just really wanted to depict a walk around my neighborhood and around a lot of places at night. So trying to sort of make this three-dimensional version of something that I had always been making two-dimensional and see if it worked. I mean, I think about this thing like the Death Star. That's kind of what I call this piece because it's so big and dark and different aspects of it. But immediately on the heels of that one, yes, sir?
Is anybody allowed to walk inside those?
No. So he just asked if anybody is allowed to walk inside of those. I will say I can. But you are not supposed to. And all the other ones, the ones that are sort of wall mounted, there is no there's no performative aspect, right? There's none of that ta-da sort of jumping through these things. I mean, it gets asked to me often, right? Like, can I hang this in front of my door? Can I do all these things? Can I touch it and run through it? And I mean, if you buy it, you could do whatever you want with it. But there's none of that, the othering of these objects to fit those other kind of functions. So right on the heels of that three-dimensional one came this one. So this is called Gainer. So this is, I can tell you that this is 2006, about 2006. It's 12 feet long by 3 feet wide. I really was trying to figure out, here's the other side, how I could depict something flat in a three-dimensional way, but that would retain its flatness. So this is a picture of a swimming pool. Right, so my goal was to try to make that corner that we're looking at there remain visually flat, even though it is not. I never know if they're fully successful or not, but those are kind of the little things that I'm willing to share that spur on this stuff. We're good for time? Oh yeah, all right. Wow, I've been talking a long time. So this is a piece called Helix. It is a life-size fire escape made out of clear acrylic, meant to hang from the ceiling, also from 2006. It's another picture of it. There I am for scale. Around this time, I made a conscious decision to not try and deal so much with the rural, exurban, and suburban part of my reality, and to really try to go more towards the opposite of that, right? Something a little more urban. And this was the first thing. This is because, even though I said I grew up in central New York, there's a lot of back and forth to New York City, so country mouse, city mouse situation, and prior to this, I felt like I was always focusing on being the country mouse. And that was fun to a point. In 2008, I was given an opportunity to have a show at LAX, so this was the summer of 2008, right before that election that happened then. I made this, it's hard to sort of see, this mirrored staircase and podium that fit in the space with all these silver microphones on top of it. You know, I was really trying to talk about, at that time, the intersection of entertainment and politics, right? It was really interesting to me then. I thought, how can I best comment on what I see happening besides a mirrored podium so that we are all kind of complicit in what is going on? Little did I know that, a few years later, maybe I need to put this thing up again. I do have a video of it, but I think we're a little pressed for time, so we're not going to look at that. We're just going to go on to this, another self-portrait. This was for the Mack Center for Art and Architecture over there in West Hollywood. They did a big show about billboards. I was invited to participate in this, and this is a picture from about a decade earlier, when I was sitting in a driveway with a camera, with no shirt on, in the winter, and just shoved a snowball in my mouth. And quickly took a bunch of pictures, not knowing what I was going to do with it. But the opportunity to put up this billboard arose, and for some reason, I thought that this billboard, this image, was the perfect thing to put up. I had no idea where it was going to end up in Los Angeles. Luckily, it was right there near MacArthur Park or Lafayette Park. As you can see in this picture, the image got tagged. It got tagged within 2 hours of going up. Right? So this is like fresh, right? Brand new, just went up. And 2 hours later, I have a collaborator. And at least whoever tagged that was really respectful of the other image, so I don't mind, and I think that's the price that we all pay when we put things out into the world, right? You lose control of it completely. And I don't know who this man is with his "What Speaks to You" sign. I just happened to see that, and I thought, oh, I'm always going to show that, because I think that I don't know, it makes me feel good. It sort of tells me that maybe I made the right decision to put this thing up there, even though there's a little bit of chatter about, like, what is that thing in his mouth? Is it like an actual thing? Is it a reference to some sort of sexual practice? Is it a slavery reference? All these things that had never sort of shown up in my work before, all of a sudden, because there's a picture of me with this giant snowball in my mouth, it's not like I'm accused, but it seems as though all of a sudden that those issues are running rampant through my work. But I don't think they really were. You know, it's just a snowball. I think you can think about it in any way that you want. This is a piece called Mayday. This is in a Rudolf Schindler house, you know, famous architect here in this region. Just happened to have the opportunity to have a show in a Schindler house, and this is just one of the pieces. This is all my old t-shirts. You know, when the armpits got really yellow, because I am one sweaty Negro, and so I have tons of old white t-shirts with yellow armpits, and I would save them. And not knowing what I was going to make, I made this piece with them. There's two little silver balls right there in the middle of that oculus. So all of these t-shirts, this is an example of them. I kind of tie-dyed them with the particulate off of my studio floor. All the dirt, all the stuff that we're breathing every day living here, right, has been put to use to tie-dye these t-shirts and then to lay them all out in this form. It's about 12 feet across. Some random bike rack I made. All right, you guys are getting it all today. An earlier version of the piece that is in the show here, I'm just going to whip through that. This is a piece called Long Division. Right? So I have been collecting the pictures of the yellow police tape for a long time. The earliest picture that I could date that I have is from about 2002. So anytime I will see one of these pictures, whether it is full color or black and white, I save it. I was able to use them again up here this is the third iteration of this piece. I'm not going to talk too much about what this really means. I think that you guys can kind of figure out some of it. Right, long division, so that was the shot here in the gallery as it gets pushed inside and outside of that temporary wall. I'm going to skip this. photograph. It's a glove with some feathers on it. I'm also not going to talk too much about this. Here's another photograph. Now we are real recent. This is from, I think, about 2010 or 11. It's just a photograph of a paper towel. Again, with the particulate, you know, I was cleaning something on the floor at my house. Paper towel. Looked at it when I took my hand away and started to think about like the Shroud of Turin and other ways in which, you know, the body can leave a mark and the dirt leaves a mark, and again, questioning like, oh, who am I? Where am I? What does this mean? How can I sort of talk about a lot of these issues by not really talking about them or saying too much specifically. So this is a photograph of that paper towel. This is also from that same sort of era, so 2011, I think. This is a piece called Jet. These are, what is it? It's like that squishy balls that you put in the water and they expand, super absorbent polymers. So this piece is based on my desire to share my body with the audience in some way. So, you know, these little balls get soaked in water and they expand. I added some other liquids besides just water in there because I was really interested in the lifespan of this piece. This is what happens to it. So it starts out all fresh and moist and squishy, and then as the liquid in there evaporates, it turns into this. And so my goal was to have everyone sort of breathe in some of me, right? So there's some saliva, there's some tears. The person who showed this wouldn't let me pee in the water, so I didn't get to do that part. So it's mostly like spit and tears and a little bit of sweat. Well, actually a lot of all of those things. But really it's about the transformation of the piece over time, and then the sharing of, I don't know if I would say my body fluids with you in some weird passive way, but I guess that's what happened. It's a piece called Natter, also from that same time. I'm kind of broke often because I am an artist who is just broke, so I have to use a lot of things that are readily available and that I can get my hands on. This is just a bunch of tin cans mounted directly on the wall, again in one of my favorite shapes, a half a circle or an arc or a circle. I really like those shapes for some reason. They also, the black cans have a very particular black glitter in them. I think that's what the inside of my brain looks like, and all of our brains, right? Really dark with just, as the synapses fire, those would be the other colors mixed in there with the black, right? Dark and sparkly. Again, there's just a body in there for some scale. This is from 2016, I think. This is another tin can piece. This one is called Concord, as compared to the Arc, because someone said, it's really not so interesting to see round things make more round things. And I had never really thought about that, and so reconnoitered some aspects of that piece to make those round things not describe something round, and just now they are talking, in my mind, about like not only the line and a drawing, but you know, the contrail that maybe a Concord would leave behind. And I always think sometimes it's interesting to see how people choose the few things that actually go into private residences, how people choose to live with art. I think, you know, my students hardly ever get to see that, and I always think that that's important, that everyone understands that the things that we make are sometimes really best lived with versus just seen on a wall in someone else's sort of institution. So, see, someone, I think, was kind of brave enough to decide to live with these freaking tin cans from the Vietnamese restaurant in my at the base of my building with some glitter in it, right? I can respect that. 2016, this is called Parade. Again, I think, how are we for time? All right, we're good. We're almost done. So thank you for bearing with me. Parade, bicycle tires, and CDs. I really like round things. Am I still on? All right, great. I really like round things, and I don't know if I would consider this recycling. It's just sort of taking simple materials, very few of them, and recontextualizing them together to see what I could come up with. I will tell you that my studio is downtown as well, and I saw something very similar on a random bicycle one day. Some guy had all these CDs in his bike tires as he rode around looking into dumpsters. And I have a picture of it, but it's not in this presentation, but it really stuck with me. And using that as the source material, I came up with this piece, Parade, and then this piece, which is called Republic. So this is two 20-foot long collections of wheels with CDs in them. So again, there we go for some scale. And I'll just flip through these. I don't quite know what I want to say about these, so I'm not going to say too much. I'll just let you look. All right, well, maybe I will say a few things. I mean, I'm interested, like I said, in circles and in notions of technology that is on its way out. What does that mean? Color? I don't know, proportion? I don't know. I just wanted to make something that looked good. Yes, what? Yes, sir.
I think this is a question. Do you have an interest overall, thinking about how you make things, going back to the earlier slides you've shown us?
Uh-huh.
And there seems to be this fragmentation in everything. There was like the painting that had the coolant in it, these old plastic bags.
Uh-huh.
Then going to the portraits that are all pixelated, then the beads are really fragmented images in a pixel way.
Mm-hmm.
The long division thing, the kite, these, you're fragmenting out the bike parts.
Uh-huh.
And it seems like a
You want to know why?
process-based thing that you go through is that you haven't addressed it all as a conceptual concern, but I'm wondering if it...
You're right, because I have not addressed that at all. I mean, I think that is some really good looking out. I mean, thank you for that. No, seriously. Because it's hard sometimes to step back from your own practice to sort of see those things that I think maybe to you might be, it's like so obvious, right? And I just, I never even thought about it, and now that you say it, I totally see it. I don't know where that comes from. I think I just give myself the permission to make things, and it ends up like that. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how to answer that. I don't want to necessarily overthink that as a thing that happens in the work, but now I'm gonna. Which is okay. But no, thank you for pointing that out. Do you write? Right?
All the time.
Okay. And I think this is the last thing I'm going to show you. This is from late 2017. This is some public art that was in New York City. I will say that I really have some bad luck with public art. I've tried and tried. Besides that bike rack that I showed you, it never works, right? I never get past we'd like you to present. Until someone was like, no, we're going to make you make something. Very specific. And so this piece is called Centra, and it is just three giant sort of frames over a staircase with the clear plastic sheeting wrapped around it and hung down. Like, it's very similar to the curtains that you might see at maybe a car wash or at the supermarket in the refrigerated section, just to try to put these things up there. I think those things go up about 20 to 25 feet, if not a little higher. I don't know, it also just looks like the beaded curtains, right? I think in the way that you were talking about these things that you are able to identify happening over and over and over again, I can at least identify that I like things that hang, and I like a vertical hang. I don't really try to go too much deeper than that, because, if I start going down those rabbit holes, it could be really detrimental to a lot of things. But I can at least identify that, for some reason, I am attracted to certain types of things in my own work, and they just keep showing up. So there's 3 of them. There I am. Again, for scale. So it was really nice to see how these things change. They change the landscape. They change when the sun comes through them. They were up for a year. They change as the seasons change. I think the last picture I have is them in winter. It's a totally sort of different situation.
Where is this?
That was in New York City, up in Harlem. I think also people kept thinking that it was like I was ripping off Christo and the gates, those orange gates that went through Central Park, but I didn't necessarily get that feeling, because those are really about something else than these are about, and just because the form is slightly similar, I think a lot of people always want to take sometimes it's easier to just go, oh, it looks like this thing, instead of having to do the deeper thinking about them. But I'm not going to slam any of those people now. That is a good question. When this piece came down, I don't know. I know I asked for all that plastic because I wanted it in the studio to play with so that it could potentially become something else, and I never got it. So I have a feeling that when they took this down, it just, poof, vanished into nothing, which I also think is really fitting for aspects of my practice, which I didn't show tonight. There's a real whole thing about lots of ephemeral work that just exists for a show or a day or a very short time, and then as long as it's documented, that's the only way that it will ever exist again after that time. So this also feels like it just fits into that same trajectory. Like, it's up. I hope you get to see it. If you don't, you miss the real thing, and you get to look at it through a digital reproduction that way. But there is a lack of tangibility and permanence that I think runs through a lot of these things that I do. And with that, I'm done. That was some good timing, thank you. See, just about an hour. Are there, I should say I don't have any, I'm not gonna answer any questions because I said it before, but I see a hand way in the back.
Yeah. So the top of your head, how far away is the lowest point of the plastic?
On that?
Yeah.
If I stood on the step underneath them and reached my hand up, I still couldn't touch it. And even if I jumped, I couldn't touch it. So they were made high enough so that people really couldn't get up there or climb up there. So I think it must be higher than 20 feet, maybe a little 25 or so to the top of the thing, but they're pretty tall. Yes, sir.
You said earlier during your schooling, you were
In terms of which stance?
I think earlier when you were.
No, I know that.
Thinking Jane,
Uh-huh.
from your undergrad to graduate, you're trying to find your place.
Uh-huh.
And
You're asking where I am now? I'm still always going to try. I'm always. That is a constant journey and battle. So I mean, I don't know. I'm still trying to figure out who and what and where I am and what is the best way for me to make work that kind of talks about that, you know, because particularly now, right? So I always felt like I was slightly responsive to the world outside, but, you know, I am personally not so interested in making really didactic, super heavy-handed work, right? Because it would be the perfect time, right? For me, you know, like for me, I think, for me to make something that could talk about all the crazy stuff that's going on here without sort of nuance, right? So I'm still always trying to figure that stuff out. That is almost a daily, it's not a struggle, it's not a battle, it's just like the reality of, oh, today I might want to deal with this, I might want to deal with that, I need to deal with this. How does all of that come together to end up in some sort of artwork too? Particularly when nothing seems so stable. I mean, I think I'm semi-stable, but that in this shift, if everything is shifting constantly kind of around me, how do I figure out who and what I am? And if I do, I never want that personally to be locked down to one thing, because that would also make me a little nuts, right? So there is I'm embracing the fluidity in myself and that constant search and that constant, that constant search and quest for that answer. And in a way, I hope I never sort of find it, because then I would just, I might be satisfied and stop. So it's every day-ish is that same sort of trying to find and locate those questions and that stance, right? Yes?
Your talking just now reminds me of your Instagram account.
Uh-huh. Yes.
And I'm looking at it right now.
Oh, great.
And I follow you, and I always look forward to your posts, because they're not just simply,
Uh-huh.
my
Well-
delicious cappuccino and my manicure.
Right.
They're
Do you want me to talk about that a little bit? Now is a good opportunity, because I don't normally talk about this that much. So I am not a huge social media fan. Like I've never had a Facebook ever, because the idea of like elementary school, high school, college, the nefarious other aspects of my life, all that stuff coming together in one place sounds like a nightmare to me. And so I have avoided all aspects of that stuff, right? I just, it's just not my thing. And then I got my arm twisted to join Instagram. Oh, you're gonna love it because it's only pictures. And I did. But I am not the person who wants to share, right, as you said, my cappuccino or even my life, right? There's no pictures of me on there, right? I consider it, one, like a magazine, my own magazine. And then I think about Mary J. Blige singing My Life, My Life, My Life in the Sunshine. And that's how I tend to think about my Instagram. So it's all the things that I see through just my daily life, those are the things that I choose to share, like the people sleeping in the street, the strange sort of, just the things that, my reality. It's just very much a very, Yes, yeah. It's just it's kind of my reality. And I think what I enjoy most about it is it lets me flex other muscles, right? I love taking pictures. I didn't show tons and tons of photography here, but that Instagram lets me flex a certain aspect of my practice, a photographic practice that I don't think would have gone over in the same way in like a more tangible situation, right? Like if I had printed some of those things and put them up, it's not gonna sort of have the same effect. I'm not necessarily after an effect, but it just lets me flex those muscles that I never get to flex that often until the invention of Instagram. And now I can sort of put slightly disturbing things out there. There are I will say that a lot of it is, there are a few people in Los Angeles and some other places that if I have a picture, I always think of them just going, ew. And then I think that's a sort of good thing, that there are very specific people that I think when they look at this, they're just gonna go, ew, right? And then I know that I'm on the right track. That it will kind of make them slightly unnerving. So feel free. I mean, I don't want to shill for like, hey, everyone, you feel free to look, but I think it's kind of, and that sort of affects the show too, right? So that feeds a little bit into the show that I put you like that. Those muscles bled into that. A lot of this stuff that you saw here sort of feeds into that. So again, that goes back to that constant sort of search for that stance and mixing and matching and throwing it all together.
I like whether it feels like they're visual notes.
I think they are kind of visual notes. I mean, I always think, I should save. There are some that just will never make it, right? Because they're just too much. I think having lived in downtown particularly has really affected that sort of situation, the stuff that happens outside my door. Again, the reality of my life as I ride my bike to my studio every day, I right through the middle of that, and that tends to be my other laboratory. Like I feel like I learn so much just by being able to observe the world around me from that particular vantage point that is less the bike, but just I feel so lucky that I get to see this stuff that's happening, and that I am unable and unwilling to turn away, and unable and unwilling not to share it with everybody since I have the opportunity, because I don't want, I always think there's too much, it's so easy to not look, but I think it's so important to look, and that just counts for everything. And I'm not going to say anything else on that because it sounds so good to end this right there. So I will see you, I guess, down the hall. Great, thank you.